I think that's the hardest thing about anything you can do in blockchain is governance. And how do you allow governance by a group of people that doesn't just evolve into a mess where the majority tries to extract value for themselves?
So my question wasn't nearly that deep. I really just wanted to know if you had to pick, like, go hang out with Charles at the ranch for a weekend, or like go sit in a cave and code with Beniamin somewhere. I feel like if I had to choose one of those dudes to just like chill with, no shade to Beniamin, but I feel like Charles would be a more interesting weekend. Today, I am so excited to welcome our comrade in arms, our good friend, someone you know, and if you don't know her yet, you're gonna love her, I promise, Vanessa Harris. Vanessa, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Very blessed to be here. And after the introduction of the show, I think I'm going to hire you, Evan, to do intros for my show as well, because that was phenomenal. I'm getting excited just to see what's going to happen today. So it's really great to be here with you all.
He just makes you want to just like charge in on a horse and just start just hacking at people in like a Braveheart scene or something like that.
I aspire to be the Michael Buffer of Web3. One time for a short stint, I was the announcer of a roller derby, which was a lot of fun. I used to say, ladies and gentlemen, monsters and machines, people and creatures of all ages. It was so fun. So I would do that for you anytime, Vanessa, but it's enough about me. We want to hear about you. Tell the people who may not know who you are and how you come to be on the show today. What do you do in Web3?
Awesome. Well, thank you. So, my journey through life has been very heavy in technology, traditional big tech roles for most of my career. But, as far as Web3, just, recently, the last few years, I've more than dipped my toe in. I've jumped into the deep end completely. Been part of a few Web3 startups. I have the blessing to be an advisor for a number of Web3 companies as well. And, pretty much view crypto and Web3 and the technologies with blockchain as akin to what happened in the mid-90s with the internet. And I feel like we're on the cusp of a revolution in how we interact with each other, in finances, in all different aspects of society. And I feel like the technologies with Web3 and with blockchain are part of what's going to drive us there. So just really excited to be here, to be talking with some other great folks who are also, deep into the space and to be able to share and to learn.
I would love to know, we all talk about this all the time, and I love hearing everyone's answer for what is Web3, and I bet you have a good one. What do you say when people ask you, what is Web3?
Yeah, so I feel like when people ask what is Web3, there's really two benefits of Web3 that really strike me strongly that differ from the traditional Web2 as you would be used to from a Google or a Facebook. The first of which is the ability for people to actually own something, whether it's their currency or their data or whatever it is, your speech, the ability to truly own it in your wallet and to own it on the blockchain. That's unique, and that's never really been done before. You think about your Gmail account. If Google decided you did something bad, they can switch it off and it's gone. So I think that's one thing about Web3 which is different. The second thing is around sharing in the value that's created. Often the value in Web2 accrues to really large companies, but in Web3 we have the potential through DAOs, through tokens, for the community to share in the value that's created, and for it not to kind of aggregate all in and kind of pool into a small set of people. And so I feel like those are two generation-defining aspects of Web3 that set it apart from Web2. And I know that people often say, well, what's the point of Web3? I think we're kind of slowly unraveling that onion with these two things at its core. And we'll eventually get to the full suite of applications, whether they're financial or social or whichever aspect we're building applications in. But I think the point is it's being built on a different foundation than Web2.
Fair. I think a lot of people would be interested to know more about some of your background in tech. You alluded to it a little bit, and I know you probably talked about it on plenty of different shows, but can you help our people understand some of your journey through that world? Because I think it sets up a really interesting perspective and experiential background. Like you say, I'm blessed to have, but you really have been blessed to have participated in shaping a lot of tools that I think people use every day. Like they may not know it. You may not know it, but you probably owe Vanessa at least a nice thank you note.
well, thank you. I mean, I think I've been part of two of the biggest big tech companies out there. I spent the first 9 years of my career at Microsoft. And through my journey there, I did a couple of things. The first, infamously, helped to launch the first version of Zune, which was Microsoft's failed iPod competitor. But I think more relevant to this conversation, I helped to bring Microsoft Office into the Web 2 age with the Office web apps and the first release of that. And so I feel like I've had a front row seat to what it means to go from the traditional desktop application into Web 2 and kind of all the things that embodied and the idea of sharing and collaboration that wasn't quite present in the traditional world. Then my time at Google, I was very blessed to be able to found and launch Google Domains, which is Google's domain registrar, to help businesses and folks get online and to be able to express their online presence. So again, kind of very deep into Web 2, working very closely with a lot of names you'd know, Shopify and Squarespace and some of those folks. And I had the opportunity to be in that world. Also spent some time when I was at Google, kind of leading products and product management, able to help shape some of Google's community strategy. And so I think community is a huge part of Web3. And so I think that's where my taste for Web3 was crafted, as it were, and seeing that there is a little more to what we can offer as for a community than just what the traditional Web2 tools were offering.
Yeah, no doubt.
I want to know, Vanessa, do you feel like you've, in a sense, gone rogue because of your, because of your years and years in Web 2, and now you're kind of, I mean, if you look at it in a dystopian manner, if that's big tech and they're trying to own, privacy and user rights and everything like that, and now Web 3 is kind of the revolution of the everyman, is that kind of like, straying from that original path that you were on? Or is it a continuation of it just with improved, features?
I actually see it as getting back to the core of what Web 2 started as. And if you look back in the day, I think Tim O'Reilly did a fantastic presentation of what Web 2 was. And it encapsulated a lot of the things we talk about with Web 3 around kind of owning and sharing and collaboration. But I think it's the big tech companies that strayed from that originally. When I joined Google, and the mantra was "Don't be evil." Halfway through my tenure at Google, that disappeared from the Google website. There was a huge uproar about it, and it came back. But I think the spirit of it never actually came back after that. And I think that's where Charles Hoskinson often talks about "Can't be evil is greater than don't be evil." And so I feel like that's a core part of Web3, where because of the decentralization, because code is law, because of the way systems are set up, it makes it more difficult to be evil. Now, of course, it doesn't mean everything's going to be successful. We've seen some spectacular failures, even in the DeFi space with Luna. But it does mean that at least the reasons for lack of success don't tend to be around kind of an individual who is exploiting a lot of other folks if it's done well and audited and all of that. So, we still have all those challenges to get over, but I feel like it's trying to get back to the core of what Web 2 aspirationally was trying to be.
I love that you say that, because I made a video a while ago that was basically just like the back to the future-ness of what Web 3 is. And how this is what it was originally pitched as. And then the downfall, if we want to call it that, was simply that the people who saw what was being created and took all the advantage of it were these monsters in the space, and so easily could that happen again to a degree in Web3. And we're kind of seeing it right now, right? Like, we're in this bear market. The people who have lost the interest are the general retail market. And the people who are like leaning in are these whales and institutional buyers who are just kind of silently buying up a bunch of stuff and, not really talking much about it. All the news articles are kind of like real cringy right now. Like, I can scroll and scroll and scroll and it's all just price predictions. And is this the bottom? And when is it going to come back? And all this stuff that doesn't matter, nothing about, the interesting stuff that I enjoyed covering before. And I think the thing that sets this apart from Web 2 is that in creating the infrastructure to build new projects in the Web 3 space, we've basically made an a perpetually repeatable reset button to where if large institutions were to come in and take back over and let's say buy all the Bitcoin, you know, theoretically, we could just make a new one and start again without them. And it would be a whole process of going back to the beginning and starting over and convincing people now that this is the one to do and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it's technically possible. And so the idea of transparency has been, you know, kind of like more brought to the forefront, which I think is really cool. But it's interesting that you say, you know, this is what we were trying to do with the internet, because I do agree with that fully.
Well, and I'd be interested to hear how, Vanessa, how you think it's going in terms of, I heard recently, I don't remember if it was at a conference we were at, guys, if it was, somebody was saying that like 95% of all Bitcoin in existence is owned by about 5% of addresses. Or we learned the other day, somebody was telling us like, yeah, there's like 200 e-gold whales that own this percent of the supply or whatever. And I was like, what? It was so, you know, we talk about decentralization and we talk about like the node system and the validators, and like on paper, it looks pretty good. But when you start bringing in stats like that, I'm like, oh, well, shit, we're already screwed. Do you have a thought about it?
Yeah. So, you know, I think firstly, you know, if you look at Bitcoin, originally its supply was almost 100% owned by a very small set of folks. And over time, it's been decentralizing and decentralizing. And I think that the nature of Bitcoin, where it actually allows, it sort of forces that, right? You think miners are out there, they're mining the Bitcoin, but to support some of their expenses, at some point they have to sell something. So it's kind of built into the nature of the protocol that it's decentralizing out. Now, I think it will take a while for some of that wealth to spread everywhere. Large institutions, people who have the means, you know, very definitely are jumping in to some large degree. But for the first time in recent memory, retail has had the opportunity to be part of that. So you have people who've been able to experience some of that wealth generation who would never otherwise have. And so I think that's a good aspect to it. But I do think if you look at some of the capture that's happening in particular protocols, and I think Bitcoin's better than most. If you look at Ethereum, one of the things that I'm concerned about is the fact that staked Ethereum right now, roughly 35% is sitting on Lido as staked Ethereum. That's a huge amount with a single validator. You look at Solana, it's basically the VC chain. For all the good things about it, it has that aspect to it. But then you contrast that. One of the projects I'm very deeply involved in is Cardano, and the ethos of the community is decentralization in all things. Like there are conversations often about what's the minimum attack vector, which I think is sitting somewhere in the 20s right now. Those are the kinds of conversations we need to be having as a crypto community, because that's what's important. It's how durable is it? How decentralized and robust to nefarious actors, and how are each of the tools built in a decentralized way? So I love Elrond, I love the team, but it's a very first party blockchain. You've got the Meyer DEX, you've got the Meyer app. Protocols like Cardano are more decentralized. There's no central entity that's building all the apps, the decentralized apps on it. I think that's an important part as well. So I think we're still very early on. I wouldn't sound the alarm just yet, but at least these technologies have the potential to be decentralized at its heart, and that's something we've never had before.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You know, I like that you mentioned Cardano. I mean, you know, we've known you for a while, and we see what you post on Twitter, and I want to kind of get into that with kind of the audience that you've built on Twitter later. But you know, early on, I've been an investor in Cardano for several years now, and I remember when Elrond came on the scene for me, I saw a lot of what they were doing kind of mirrored in Cardano, or I guess vice versa, because Cardano was first. You know, things like Beniamin going to Miami and talking to the mayor of Miami and kind of leading in that way. And, you know, there are great big aspirations in talking about sovereign identities and onboarding the next billion. You know, it's all kind of things that Cardano and Charles Hoskinson has, you know, talked about and evangelized for. So, I don't know. I love that Cardano is decentralized. I don't know if it still has the title of being most decentralized, but I know all the new, you know, ADA coming into circulation is all from 100% decentralized nodes, right? Or stake pool operators. what do you see as the path forward then for Elrond? Because, to be fair, there are pros to being a little bit more centralized, especially when you're in your nations,
in the beginning stages, especially.
Right.
Yeah, 100%. And you've sort of seen the kind of user experience they've been able to build with their tools, which is a cut above anything else.
Yeah.
Cardano still doesn't have a best-in-class mobile wallet. And that's unfortunate. I think it's holding it back. And that's something that the Elrond team did really well. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to encourage an ecosystem of builders when you have such a strong first-party app. I often liken them to Apple. Apple has the ability to put out applications and devices that all work fantastically well together. But in a sense, it discourages others from building the same class of experience because it's difficult to get an audience to switch to something else. Right? Myar app is good enough. The Myar Dex is good enough. And so I think the big challenge before them is how do they encourage those builders in the ecosystem to step up and to offer comparable tools to everything they're doing? I think about the NFT marketplace, which they've been teasing for a while now. And my big concern there is that there are a flourishing set of marketplaces on Elrond right now. You've got, Dead Rare, and I'll never know how to pronounce it, XOXNO.
Me neither.
And
it's like Elon's baby. What the hell? Xerxes. I don't know. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, something like that. And so the idea is you have this, I think at early stages, but flourishing set of marketplaces. And I worry that if it's done wrong, that the NFT marketplace release from Elrond could be a great success, but also a long-term failure by discouraging some of these other participants to continue to be part of the ecosystem. So
that's a really fascinating point of view. It kind of reminds me when I was doing software sales, every year I'm sure you're aware of is a Dreamforce, right? The Dreamforce conference. And basically what that is so Salesforce is a CRM. It's a customer relationship management software that people in sales organizations use to keep track of their clients. And Salesforce is the dominant one. It's the Ethereum of CRMs, basically. And every year they have this giant conference, usually in San Francisco, right? And it's, hundreds of thousands of dollars to attend and have a booth and all this stuff. But it's interesting because you get there and it's like, all these people are here because of shortcomings of Salesforce. If Salesforce were a one-stop shop, then this conference wouldn't need to exist. So it's interesting that you say that the superiority of Myar app and a few of the other things that Elrond has come out could be potentially detrimental or discouraging to future devs who might otherwise be interested in building a top Elrond. Is there a way to fix that?
I don't know. I mean, it's going to be quite a challenge. You obviously don't want to make your own products worse and to reduce the experience that people have.
Yeah, let's just cut this out.
Guys, just cut it.
Just throw a massive bug in there.
But I do think, the fact that there are, for example, other exchanges that are popping up, J2 Exchange is one, is hopeful, but none of those have gotten the level of traction. So I think it's, partly on them being able to promote a lot of these other tools and give them center stage. In some cases even over their own first-party solutions. But I think also it's building the set of APIs that apps can use to offer some of those experiences. And I know y'all with the Faceless Mania have had some challenges in the reliability and performance of the Elrond APIs. And so that's, a place where they can kind of lean into. And it's heartening to me that there are other API providers on the Elrond blockchain that are starting to flourish. And I think that's a good thing. And so maybe this is a place where they encourage that a bit more than other places.
Well, something I observed that they do is that they have a pretty robust relationship with like independent developers or people who are building on the platform, who are doing open source stuff. There's a person named Julian who's contributed like the whole Bible that we have so far. Tanner's been involved with them a little bit. Rezvan of Elrond Giants. It's the Elrond Dev Hub. And I understand the team is pretty involved with them, but I'm not in that world, so I don't know how robust the relationship is.
It's a really interesting point because you've got like Elven Tools has been recommended, by the team itself. I mean, the last time that we raised a concern about the API performance for one of our things, the last rev point problem, the Elrond team's recommendation was go look at Beware. Yeah.
Awesome.
I guess it's awesome.
No, I mean it makes sense, right? Because like, you think about it, like you said, Vanessa, you wouldn't want to torpedo your own product, right? But I guess you could intentionally leave an area, unsolved, something that third party could then be encouraged to come in and solve. So like the MyRDEX shouldn't be, trying to be the one-stop shop for everything, because every feature that anyone could possibly want needs to be built there. But if
I think it was the Moxie who wrote a fantastic article about the shortcomings of Web3 a couple months ago now, where basically for Ethereum, Infura is the layer. It's basically the single point of failure, and so it can do everything from change what shows up in MetaMask to essentially dramatically alter the experience that users have with Ethereum, ostensibly a decentralized blockchain. And so I think that's something that needs to be addressed broadly in the ecosystem, is like, what is the Infura counterpart, and how do we allow multiple of those to flourish so we can start building from the decentralized foundation to the next layer also being decentralized. And ultimately, the end game is that the dApps that you're using are decentralized as well, and there's lots of different ones you can choose from, so there is no single point of failure.
Vanessa, I'd be really curious to get your opinion on this, because you are somebody who is it seems like equally involved in both Elrond and Cardano. And in our experience, when building the Faceless Many, there was a vast dearth of documentation for our developers to use. So we kind of had to it was the wild, wild west. We just had to figure it out on our own, which made them stronger in the long run. So I guess that could be thanked for. But when Cardano came out with smart contracts, immediately afterwards there was just a plummeting of morale and real buildability, because it wasn't quite there yet. So in my experience, or I shouldn't ask that. I should say, in your experience, have you looked at the docs for developers, and which of those blockchains has a more developer-friendly environment, I should say?
Yeah, so I'll say a couple things before I answer that. I think one of the challenges we get into with blockchains is we're talking about very base level technology. And so something like Cardano releases smart contracts could be like the kernel in Microsoft Windows releases the ability to support hyperthreading. Okay, what does that even mean? Who's going to use that? Without APIs on top of it, it's not really accessible to anyone to be able to use. So I feel like we're very intimately involved in the process. So we see something like Cardano launches smart contracts. Great, the foundational layer has that capability. It's not exposed yet. It's not usable in any way. It's a milestone for the team, and maybe they need some work on their communication and marketing there, but it's not the end goal. So I think it's unfortunate that we tend to judge blockchains by the raw technology at the foundation rather than what's actually exposed and usable. And we're seeing the same thing with Cardano and the Vassal hard fork, and the idea that it's not just the capability, it's the APIs, it's the applications taking advantage of the capability. So I think that's one area where, as a community, we just need to be aware that's happening. Now to your question of Elrond versus Cardano in terms of ease of use, Cardano has a number of challenges there. It's using a recursive language in Haskell, which is not typical for engineers to use. I think the last time I did anything with Haskell was many, many decades ago in college. And I'm sure that's true for most engineers. And so that's something that detracts from it. Some of their tools with Pluto scripts and other things are still in development, still growing. And so that's, again, a place where they're taking a path that's more difficult for a security and reliability perspective that hampers the growth of the ecosystem. At the same time, you've seen them step back from creating best-in-class tools across everything. So there are a number of NFT stores, a number of wallets, a number of dexes, et cetera, et cetera. And so they're really leaning more into the community to build upon that. So I'd say for someone just coming in, Elrond's probably a much better experience to develop on. But then you ask, okay, who am I competing with? And what can I develop where I don't have strong competition from the core team? And that's where I think Cardano and Ethereum and a number of the other chains really shine in terms of that. I think that the canonical example I'll use there, even though it ended up blowing up, is Terra and Luna had an extremely robust set of different kinds of financial services that were offered by different third parties on top of it. And they really focused on the core of the blockchain and providing that decentralized stablecoin. It ended up failing, but the ecosystem they built was actually a testament to something I think is done extremely well in crypto. And we could use more of that kind of ecosystem building.
Wow. So Evan, I know you're gearing up. I just have one.
Go for it, dude. Go for it. Go for it.
I hate it because he's so good at saying everything. But Vanessa, then in your mind, then what would be? You've kind of been hinting at it in your previous answers, but what is the highest pinnacle of leadership, of stewardship that a blockchain can aspire to? Then,
Whew. That is a challenging question. Because I think the reason it's challenging is you don't want a central leader. And I think the best thing that Satoshi ever did was disappear. Now hopefully he's not going to move his wallet at any point. That would really scare everyone and just put a capper to the bear market. But if you look at Ethereum and how they kind of look to Vitalik to make decisions and how the decision making seems a lot more centralized than perhaps a blockchain should have, I see that as a failing. And I see someone like Charles Hoskinson trying to thread that needle to be kind of the spiritual leader of it without stepping in and saying what should happen in every single case. And now, whether you like him or don't like him, I think that particular aspect of what he's doing is very, very good. And I haven't seen a lot of other leaders try to thread that needle in quite the same way. And you can contrast it with something like Binance Chain, which is completely owned, has its own set of validators that are owned by Binance or associated with Binance. And I feel like that's the wrong direction for blockchain. We're not trying to build DeFi that is actually centralized and owned by a single person. We're trying to build DeFi that is decentralized. That's the whole point of it. Otherwise, we're just building another bank. And I think that's also a place where Beniamin is doing a pretty good job, even though they're building a lot of applications, but of trying to focus on the core of what a blockchain should be. And you look at, Elrond, even they're pushing into governance conversations. I think that's the hardest thing about anything you can do in blockchain is governance. And how do you allow governance by a group of people that doesn't just evolve into a mess where the majority tries to extract value for themselves? And that's something that Cardano is trying to address with the Voltaire era. I think that's something that even you see in Bitcoin. It's got different groups of people who are trying to do the governance. You've got the developers, you've got the miners. At least they have some tension there, and so I think that's going to be a challenge going forward. And leadership through that allows people to be able to self-govern. I think that's the leadership. In the line of maybe a Thomas Jefferson is what we're looking for.
So my question wasn't nearly that deep. I really just wanted to know if you had to pick, like, go hang out with Charles at the ranch for a weekend or like go sit in a cave and code with Beniamin somewhere. I feel like if I had to choose one of those dudes to just like chill with, no shade to Beniamin, but I feel like Charles would be a more interesting weekend. But I'm just curious what you think. He's there in Texas, right? Or is he in Colorado? He's in Colorado. Yeah.
I think it depends on your goals. I think you'd have a more interesting weekend with Charles. If you were looking for a career in Web3, I think Beniamin would probably help you out a little bit more. You get to experience more of what's actually happening on the ground. I do get the sense that Charles is very theoretical in what he sees and is less kind of practical and tangible on the ground with what's happening.
Yeah, but he's also got a falcon, like, that sits on his hand, right? Like, that's his pet, right? And I'm pretty sure he's got like, four-wheelers and like maybe a lake somewhere that I could like go swimming in, and probably
he for sure has mini donkeys. He has invited many people to come and ride his mini donkeys. Not me, unfortunately. So Charles, if you're listening, I'd be very happy to come ride a mini donkey with you.
Yeah, and Charles, me too, man. We're all for it.
Yeah, we'll roll up. We'll bum rush him.
Cool.
Yeah.
We're holders.
Storm the gates, yeah. Holders and stakers. So.
That's exactly right. Yeah, we're helping secure the network, so I feel like the least you could do is let us pet your donkey.
Exactly.
And just to make it even less deep, I want to go back to something real quick that you said way at the beginning. Thank you for the Zune, because I had one of those things, and I love that thing.
Alex is forever the anti-Apple guy.
He is.
Yeah. Well,
it's part of his identity. Defines him.
Something that turned me to that side, obviously, was that my dad was part of the software developers initiative that created the Android platform. So it's always been just like, I don't know, it's the thing that was in my family. All of us had a computer. He was very, like, before I could play a video game, I had to make one. And he was always very Android. Like we had desktop machines that were running like rudimentary versions of Android sitting around in our house back in the day, like some old Compaq that was in the basement that was like the Android box and stuff like that. But I did get a Zune, and all my friends had iPods. It's just like now. I have the Android, and Mac is, everyone is always yelling at me for having the green bubbles. But that thing was awesome. Like, I mean, I know it didn't, land the way the iPod obviously did. And there's a whole bunch of reasons we could get into about that. But I just wanted to say that is really cool because
I'm just picturing young Alex, wanting to play a video game, and his dad saying, "No, you have to make one." And you're like, "I don't know what one is yet. Can I play one to find out?" He's like, "No,
nope.
Make that video game."
Yep, sorry.
And my first video game, I vividly remember the Eyewitness History Museum's like exploratory software where you got to walk through a virtual history museum and just click on the exhibits, and that was the game that I sat. It was just like reading articles about dinosaur bones and stuff like that. And then my uncle bought me Rogue Squadron, and my parents just lost their minds. They're like, absolutely not. Spaceships flying, Star Wars, horror pass.
So yeah, if you couldn't tell, we're all a bunch of nerds at heart. I mean, just look at my wall behind me. You got like Dragon Ball Z and, Mortal Kombat. Yeah, Pokemon. I think that's part of the thing that binds us too is, like,
Yes.
Yeah.
Vanessa, what was it for you that drew you to work in, tech, in computers, in software? Was it just like you liked products, systematizing people, and you just happened up there, or was it very intentional? Tell us more about the journey of discovery, how you came to be that person who had that expertise.
So it was actually video games that did it.
No way.
One of us.
This was back on the old DOS machines, and I was playing some of the original games, your King's Quest and Space Quest and the like.
Oh, God.
And just the idea that you could create something like that was truly fascinating for me. So that led me on a journey to figure out, like, well, what's it all about? And I had the opportunity to build my own computers, to write my own software. And for the longest time, I really just wanted to be a software engineer. That's what I wanted to do. And it was my last year of college where, I was about to get my computer science degree and go out into the world and write code, where I realized software engineers sit in front of the computer all day writing software. It was a thought that never occurred to me. It should have occurred to me, but it never quite occurred to me. And I'm like, hold on, I kind of like talking to people too. How do I do that in the context of software? And it was just a fortuitous experience that at the time, Microsoft was hiring from a university for 3 different roles. One of which was a software engineer, which their description of it was way beyond what I was capable of doing. The other one was a software engineer in test, where you had to write code to test someone else's code. What the hell is that? And then the last one was a program manager. And the way I read the description was something akin to walk around talking to engineers and design software for users. And I'm like, I could do that. That sounds like something I'd enjoy. And the rest is history. I was extremely blessed to be able to join Microsoft and kind of do that job. That's how I got started in technology.
Are you friends with Bill Gates? Do you guys know each other?
If I was, would I admit it at this point? But no, we're not friends. I think he's got an anti-fan party growing right now, unfortunately.
Really?
Wasn't that the fake Westboro Baptist imitators at NFT NYC that was holding a sign that said "Trust Bill Gates" or "Follow Bill Gates"?
Oh no, I didn't see that they had Bill Gates signs, but I thought it was Atom Bomb Squad.
Yeah.
Their advertising is so, I would love to have them on the podcast sometime. They do such interesting instigative, like provocative stuff. I'm into that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I use them as because they had exactly, it was so like, in your face, and everyone was talking about it, and so many people were like, saw that, and that was the thing that like told them NFT NYC was a thing, because we all recognized the West Baptist-esque signs, God hates NFTs or whatever.
Yeah.
And everyone was like, people that had never spoken to me about Web3 stuff were like, this is terrible marketing. Like, this isn't going to do what you want it to. I'm like, you're here talking to me about it right now. And now I have an opportunity to tell you what it's actually about. I would say incredibly effective. Like, do you not, does that not, resonate with you that like, here you are for the first time in your life paying attention to this because of that sign? Seems like it did its job.
Yeah. Vanessa, one of the things I wanted to ask you about was, I think you've done a really great job. And I'd love to hear your tips for people who, you live primarily on Twitter in terms of your online presence. And I think you do a really great job of showing up as yourself in a way that is not like productized or, content creators are always like a parody of themselves, trying to be candid, but it's so staged. I think you do a really good job of showing up as your authentic self. And I'm curious, because I feel like in every person there are contradictions, but I see a lot of contradictions in the person that you are, and I'm not sure if it's something that you cultivate intentionally in terms of like you've got this wonderful, beautiful diagram behind you, this like yogic design, but I know you're also very interested in like liberty and gun ownership, and are not just like a what I would say is a vanilla hippie tree hugger, but you're also not just like I don't know, a nutty like conspiracy theory. You know what I mean? Like there are people who fall very much into a camp of stereotype, and you're not one of them. You are your own whole person. And it's hard to show up, I think, that way online and attract a following. Yet sometimes I think that is sort of the secret. That's the sword and the stone, is just be who you are and people will find you. But I'm curious how you balance dialectic tensions in your life, and especially in your life as somebody who shows up in public. And if you have any tips for people who are doing that to show up as themselves in public, to share something that might be important to them with an audience.
Thank you. No, I deeply appreciate that, Evan. It's something I try and do very often, is to be my authentic self as best as I can. I mean, we all have our own kind of demons that we're dealing with. One thing before I get too deep into the answer, the idea of yoga and freedom is actually a perfect match. The whole point of yoga is kaivalya, which is the freedom from the world that we're in, and finding that enlightenment. And the Hindus refer to it as moksha. So I see that a very strong blend there, less of a contradiction, more of a reinforcement with this idea of freedom. Now, where it becomes less of a reinforcement is the Yoga Sutras talk about, freedom from the deepest part of who we are, and less from the physical part of who we are. So that being said, I think as far as showing up as who you are, first it requires some sense of courage. Not everyone's going to like you. I've been hated on. The block button on Twitter is great. Primarily because once you reach a certain size of following, you'll get hate every day, and it's very difficult to sit with that hate, even if it's not intended, quite as drastically and dire as people give it to you. But I think that the other important thing is to have a set of principles on which you live your life, and to have examined those principles and to be able to stand firm in them. For example, one of the principles that I have very strongly is that every person, regardless of who you are, is deserving of love and respect. I think that can then also be contrasted with, I value very strongly the idea of individual freedom. And often society tries to place some of those things in tension and put people into camps and say, well, okay, you're this group, therefore this is the set of values you have to have. And I actually see that as counterproductive, because you turn off your thought patterns at that point. And I think every person is truly unique. And whatever the set of principles that you have that ring true for you, if you've fully examined them and you can stand in your truth, it's difficult on social media to do that. And I've been fortunate that so far, knock on wood, no one's tried to cancel me with the degree that other people have been tried to cancel, Elon Musk or someone else. But just be who you are, live who you are. Who you are is beautiful, just as you are.
Can Vanessa, I tell you guys a quick story? Really quick. I see you gearing up, but I just want to tell you a story.
No, go ahead.
A couple weeks ago, I was calling Vanessa to just, I don't even remember what we were talking about. But I wanted to ask her something, and I was feeling kind of flustered, and had come from like back-to-back meetings or was running around. I don't remember what it was, but I was just off center in my life. And I started the conversation, I think, by apologizing for that. And Vanessa just very calmly, very presently said, would it help if we took a moment to center? And I said, yes, that would be nice. And I felt the resistance inside me say, no, you got to have a meeting, do whatever. But I was just kind of like, she was like, it's, notice what's happening around you. Think of, where I am. She said, there's sunshine coming through the window, and I was feeling the sunshine where I was. And it was just a really wonderful moment where I remembered that we were friends, that I was fine, that the world was good. And it was thanks to Vanessa that I got back in touch with the truth of what was happening, and we were able to just kind of, proceed. She made space for that wonderful moment, and I wanted to, for somebody who may only be recognized as a big brain techie or a grade A shit poster, Vanessa really is the real deal in terms of a person who is present with themselves and invites others into themselves to be fully present as part of a true community. So I just think that's so great.
Thank you.
Met.
Truly a blessing. I didn't mention on this show, but for many years I was actually a yoga teacher, and that's informed a lot of my philosophy and spiritual practice, and it's helped me to be a better version of myself. And so I'm very glad that in that moment I was able to create a space that we could both connect and get more centered.
That is a really beautiful story. I like that. With the question I was going to ask you, Vanessa, I feel like it might be the wrong turn now that we've ascended to a higher state of existence. But about the hate that you receive, you said that you receive hate almost daily. And we're all content creators, so we know what that's like. I don't know. I mean, I'd just be curious to know about your experience with that, and what is it like? Because one thing that's refreshing is that you're a female in tech and in Web3. So that's, I don't know if that's quite unicorn status, but it is refreshing because a lot of the people that we meet and talk to, are all dudes. So, do you find that a lot of it, the hate that you receive, is that because of things that you post? Is it strictly content related, or is it, maybe based on things like your gender?
Yeah, so I think there's definitely hate that I receive based on what I post, and as Evan mentioned, I have an eclectic set of things that I post about. But most often, the hate I receive is because I'm not supporting someone's favorite blockchain, or questioning it, or calling out an issue, and I find that completely counterproductive, because what do you want me to be, just a cheerleader? Like, then why am I here on Twitter? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So I'd say that's the majority of it, and people feeling, let's say, butthurt because I'm not towing the line in that respect. I don't like to picture myself in any sense as the victim or oppressed, or in a space where people are kind of gunning for me. I do sense that there is a little bit of an undertone of like, do I actually know what I'm talking about? And every now and again, you can sense it in a conversation. But if I focus too strongly on that, it actually hurts my ability to show up as me, because then I'm hesitant and I'm always on the back foot wondering, okay, do I have to somehow prove my knowledge, versus just show it out there? And then over time, if they're skeptical, either their skepticism will be confirmed or not, and not to worry too much about it. I do also try and listen if the hate is less directed to me and it's just more about my opinion, then we can have a conversation. I think that's great. But if it is directed to me, it's just a hard block, and I'm moving on, because it's difficult to bear that level of negativity in your life and continue to show up.
So I really respect what you said about not playing the victim, because I think that a lot of times people fall into that trap and they think, oh, they're doing this because I'm this way, and it doesn't set themselves up for future success. They're kind of focusing on things that they can't change, rather than allowing it to harden themselves and be a more authentic version of themselves. So I applaud you for that. The other thing I wanted to suggest is, I've received hate, not in a sense that is debilitating or anything like that. I don't even complain about it, because usually what happens is somebody will say something outlandish, and I've cultivated a method that I think is just impeccable. And what you do is you type, "Okay, bub." and there's no way to respond to that. Like, if you get bubbed, you are canceled. You are destroyed.
I've never seen that not end the problem.
It does. Like, we see irrational shit on TikTok. People say
at this point, in my history with Mack, the number of bubbings that I have seen transpire in as many different settings as he has bubbed people, whether it's Twitter, whether it's Discord, whether it's TikTok comments, most commonly TikTok comments, I've never seen it where they're like, still firing on it, like it kneecaps you.
It does. It does.
It's just simple, but sweep the leg.
You have to exactly. Yeah, you have to be playing by the same set of rules. And if somebody is saying things that defy logic, then you can't try and use logic on them because it's not going to work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're in a different mental plane. So that's where the okay bub is just perfect. If they are using legitimate criticism, then you respond and you say thank you and address whatever points they have. But I just wanted to offer that to you free of charge. Feel free to use it. Yeah. It's done wonders for me.
As effective as it is for you, we'll see. I think you have a demeanor and approach where that very much can shut people down. I'm going to have to work a bit on my demeanor in that regard.
Well, I mean, you hit it right on, right? Because in crypto, right, that's what everyone wants you to do as a content creator of any kind is shill my project. And then the second you do talk about any project for whatever reason, it's stop shilling that project. And so it's just this kind of like very vicious cycle where it becomes really difficult actually to just talk about something you find genuinely cool. And if you are really impressed by the rollout of some new feature or some project's method of anything, like me with Polkadot, I love the way that they have gone about rolling everything out from ultra centralized and very in your face about how centralized they were, and then just kind of peeling it back. Like I'm very inspired by that in the way that we do things. Like I call us Web 2.25 all the time. We are very centralized, but I'm going to tell you exactly what we're controlling, which at this point is most things. And then as it makes sense, you roll that out. And I've been so inspired by Gavin for that. But like every time I make a video where I'm like, and that's why I love Polkadot so much, the comments are just like, we get it, dude, pump your bag. And it's like, you think I can move the Polkadot market, really? Like, look at me, I have like 30
I know.
multi-billion-dollar project.
It's a bummer too, because like drinking the Kool-Aid is not going to make your project succeed long term. Like that is how countries lose wars. That is why the Korean War was won, and basically anytime we fought China, sorry China, I love you, but you guys got to figure out your military game, because anytime
actually please don't, I'd like to continue the streak there. I feel like that's quite important for the freedom of humanity.
No, I mean I love I speak Mandarin and I spent 2 years living there myself, so I feel like I have kind of a unique position. But there are certain times where in the Chinese culture they've been afraid to lose face, and whether that's in the military or things like the Great Leap Forward, and there were millions of people starving, they were afraid to say to their higher ups, hey, things aren't going the way they should be. This is fucked up, right? And as a result, they save face and millions of people die. So whether that's in technology or warfare or just general society and good housekeeping, you need to be able to address those hard questions and say, look, guys, we love what you're doing, but maybe we can improve areas X, Y, Z. So I respect you for that.
One thing that I've learned as kind of my audience size has grown a little bit, still very, very small compared to other folks who are creating content. But it's to be careful with directed criticism, especially at smaller projects where you can reach out to folks individually. And I think, Gavin, I've shared a lot with you about the Faceless Many. I've shared a lot with Josh about Nojin, and trying to do more of that in private, where it's actually actionable things, where it may just come across as trying to hurt another project, and the intention might be lost on that.
Yeah, there's an art form to it.
Well, and I certainly appreciate that we are at the stage where the community is small enough that you can talk to someone directly. So why wouldn't you? That was something I wanted to ask you about, is where you see, you can certainly highlight any project you want to that you think is doing a good job. But I really would love to know, like beyond, or maybe with some exemplars, when you look at this space now, and when you look at what's here, I would love to know where you think we're going next year, or where you think we're going in 5 years. Like what use cases, what kind of products, what kind of teamwork, community, what stuff is exciting you, and what do you think is going to catch fire or help more people see why what we're doing here matters?
Oh, that's a big question. And I'm going to lean on something that people may find a little controversial. This idea that Solana is building a phone. Why a phone? Why should that even matter? So if you look at the app stores today, they're essentially gatekeepers for a lot of the value that Web3 can bring. And the gatekeeping is you're going to pay 30% to Apple or 30% to Google of anything that gets transacted or purchased. So you can imagine an NFT store. You would never launch that as an app on the phone because you're not going to give away 30% of the NFT revenue to someone. We complain about NFT stores that take a 3% royalty fee. And so I think the idea that Web3 can break out of the browser, that's a trend I'm hoping will continue and be realized within the next 5 years, where Web3 can actually be part of your device experience. And I don't think a Solana phone is necessarily the ideal expression of it, but something where the various gatekeepers that we have in the way of a truly decentralized internet can be overcome. And if you look at some of the, just listing some of the gatekeepers we have right now, there's search. That's one where people discover what's out there. They discover information, arguably very centralized in control. There's this discussion about whether and how much censorship is happening and whether it's appropriate. And so I see search as one area. There's an organization called Pre-Search that are trying to do that in a very Web3 fashion. And so that's a place we can disintermediate a gatekeeper. Another example of gatekeepers, we already mentioned the device itself. The browser is another one. You just think about a lot of these ENS addresses that you can navigate to. You type them in Chrome, it doesn't work. But if you type it in Brave, it does work. And so I see more of as more of that becomes kind of native to the browser, native to your experience, native to the device, that we start to remove the barriers between Web3 and the end user. The fact that today you need a separate app to have a wallet and to have that experience, and that it's so difficult to secure it. I think there's a layer of experience that we can bring on top of that improves it as we start to remove some of those centralized gatekeepers from the experience. And so I think there's a lot for us to do. I think we're building on a foundation that has at its heart decentralization, and so I think that's extremely positive. Other things I see for the future of crypto, this tribalism that we experience right now, and most often experienced in kind of Bitcoin maxis, everything else is a scam, or Ethereum maxis, any other L1 smart contract platform is a scam. I think a lot of that will go away as use cases for each type of blockchain product or dApp start to mature and different products find a different niche. I definitely don't think it's one product takes all. And I don't think it's all going to land on Ethereum or all going to land on Cardano. I don't think all the blockchains are going away and it's just going to be Bitcoin. And I think the appreciation of that will be something that'll grow as we go forward into the coming years.
Can we all just agree that the most annoying people in the world are Bitcoin maxis?
I mean, there's no coiners.
I don't even know. I don't need, because those guys can be converted, right? I think before long they'll come around. But to think that everything except for Bitcoin is just gonna be destroyed or be useless in the future is just hilarious to me. I can't understand it.
I think Bitcoin maxis will come around when Ethereum flips Bitcoin, and their heads will explode, and they'll have a come to Jesus moment, and it'll be what happened.
Yeah, there's going to be divorces. There's going to be, there's going to be public fallouts, bankruptcies. There's going to be fires in the streets when that happens, I think.
I will say, whether or not I could agree that they're the most annoying ever, the cringiest performances that I've seen by speakers at anything have been the heavy Bitcoin people, like screaming at people. Like, just, it's like, even if that's the goal, right? Like, to get everyone to believe that Bitcoin is the only thing. Do you really think the most effective way of bringing them to your side of the fence is to shriek at them and tell them that everything they think is stupid? Like that messaging is just so off base.
Wait, so Vanessa, is there a group that you find more annoying than the Bitcoin maxis?
I mean, if we exclude no coiners, because I think you're right. A lot of it is lack of understanding in education, and it's less about being kind of deeply convicted about it, about fiat.
It's mostly our fault.
Yeah.
I'd say, the competition may come from folks who are very deep into Web 2 and who are clinging, in my impression, to the past. And I've had a few engagements with folks like this, and they tend to roll their eyes and be dismissive of everything in Web 3 without truly understanding the value that's there, and ultimately the incredible failing that is in their products that is causing this wave of Web3 to come about. And I think if the Web2 leaders had more introspection, they could crush Web3 just by doing what Web2 was supposed to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I heard Chris Dixon say, might have been somebody else. It sounds like something he would say. I lost my train of thought. We were talking about Web 2. Yeah, here goes. Mac just highlighted me. I was going to say something profound. And then what were we talking about? Maxis, maximalists. We were talking about
the idea that Web 2,
2
did what they should have done 20 years ago, could decimate Web 3.
You lost me at Chris Dixon. I don't know who that is.
You don't know? Oh, no. I'll tell you what he said. First of all, Chris Dixon is one of the lead investor of crypto Web3 for A16Z. You need to know who Chris Dixon is. He's probably the leading public figure who is evangelizing what we do to people in Web2. He's a VC tech guy. But what he said was, I don't know anybody who understands Web3 who isn't confident about it. He said, in fact, the more I learn about it, the more confident I become about it. And that is what I see in other people, that the more they learn, he said, I don't know anybody who has learned more who has said, actually, it's a bad idea. He said the opposite is true. The more they learn, the more confident they become that this is a good solution for the problems we talk about all the time. Yeah, dude, you got to get hip to Chris Dixon. We're trying to get him on the show. We have Sonal Chokshi from A16Z who runs all their podcasting content, who is totally brilliant, coming on to talk. But Chris is, he would be a dream guest for sure.
Yeah,
and Chris, if you're watching, we all know you, we all love you. Mac is just giving Evan an opportunity to explain how awesome you are.
That's right.
Come on,
he nailed it.
It's a scripted moment.
We call that a setup in the podcasting business.
Vanessa, go ahead, Alex. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Evan, I disagree with one thing you said before, the Chris Dixon idea that this is our fault. I definitely think that as educators and creators, we could do a better job of streamlining. I always get annoyed by people who try to make it too techie and just like intimidate you into agreeing with them by proving to them that you're really smart or something like that. And all you really did was regurgitate the tech brochure at somebody that you don't really understand, but that's a whole other thing. I think that one thing really playing against us, something that I run into a lot when I'm trying to talk to someone is, like I'm trying to explain to someone who genuinely asks me because they're curious, what is an NFT or whatever. And the way that this is portrayed on general mainstream media, which is where most of the eyes are, is that it's silly, that it's scammy, that this is all a pyramid scheme. And while those do exist, so they always have an example to point at, because of course there are pyramid schemes and scam and bullshit in crypto. That just invalidates an entire industry because a few dinosaurs are too scared to like take a step out and learn something. But unfortunately, they spew that at so many people. And because of the idea, this goes back to what Mac was saying about hate and comment and arguing, you can't reason someone out of a position they weren't reasoned into in the first place. So if you just have this idea that, yes, what this newscaster is telling me is the way that it is, because in my experience, I relate to this person and they tell me that this Web3 stuff is bullshit, I'm just going to, no questions asked, like, yep. And then the next person who tries to explain it in any kind of a way that's positive is immediately set up for failure. Yeah. Because no matter what I say, you've already made up your mind that it's a scam and I'm trying to enrich myself by scamming you into buying my bag. And that's
so I agree with that. And I think that that's Chris's point, is that these people who are speaking against it are not very well informed. So how do we highlight that for them in a way that's not confrontational? How do we bub them and get them to listen and then share with them?
It's targeting those specific people, right? Like the second we start to get with a really great personality with charisma and who understands the space onto these mainstream platforms and given a chance without the condescension from the host that we're accustomed to, then you have a chance to break through and help someone else understand. Because
I would welcome the condescension. Could you imagine if a host bubbed you and then you gave it back to him like, well, actually, Jim,
Well, sure. Not everyone is like ready to take that and then just like roll with it and turn it around. Like it can hit you really personally, if you're not expecting.
Who's doing the Lord's work for NFTs right now? You guys all know him, Gary V.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Gary V is the nicest guy ever, and he's got one of the biggest social platforms. Everybody knows who Gary Vee is. He's a multiple, best-selling author. And he believes in it fundamentally, and he's been great on his calls in the past with Facebook, with Instagram, with TikTok, and now NFTs. So I think that is a big thing going for us. But too, Alex, I just wanted to highlight that, ironically, I think that part of the reason for the fervency of NFT communities is because it's so talked down about and bashed in the media. Were that not the case, the people in the NFT communities might not be as pumped about having it because they feel like they have something to prove. They have a chip on their shoulder. So it's kind of interesting that's the flip side of the coin.
Yeah, and I guess I'm also going to maybe disagree a little bit, Alex, with your contention that having broadly in public the opportunity to have a good conversation about Web3 will help. I think the first time it's really going to occur to a lot of these Web2 folks is when a Web3 application starts to take market share away from a Web2 app. And then suddenly it will be like, oh crap, what's going on here? Why is this successful? And that will start a lot of the investigation, a lot of the appreciation for what's happening. Right now, we're not quite there yet. And we haven't hit that killer app. But I do think NFTs have an opportunity to be that killer app, just not in the way that they're currently portrayed and executed on.
That's a really good, because I've always kind of thought in the back of my head that if anything was going to steal something quickly, it was going to be the NFT community and NFT technology, and the thing it was going to kill was Instagram. Because just the idea of Instagram being kind of the place that artists like to share things they're working on, and in doing so immediately surrender rights to the platform, to Meta, by posting it there. I've always just thought like that was, because I mean, that's Coco NFT's whole thing, right? Like she specifically was going after Instagram with helping you take your stuff off of Instagram, turn it into an NFT and kind of protect it there.
Here's some free ideas for anyone who wants to build an amazing thing. Build the Instagram platform where everything posted can be an NFT that someone can buy, and just create the social network around ownership. Yeah. Someone do it quick.
Yeah, and gamify it. If it's social, if it's gamified,
it might already be out there somewhere. That's very reminiscent of some talks I've had at conferences, but I couldn't put a finger on it.
I'm thinking of one in particular, yes.
Yeah, and you know what I think the other one is going to be? If it's not that, it's going to be business or enterprise. And I'm thinking whoever replaces the NFT app that does what your bank teller does, or does what a cashier does, and takes a payment or enters the information on a ledger instantly, errorlessly, in its sleep, never taking a break, that's going to be one too.
It'd be interesting to see what happens too on a government level, because in the US, we have a number of pro-Bitcoin and pro-Bitcoin mining politicians. And that could be something that kind of opens the floodgates as well. I kind of think of it, either it's going to be a company that breaks into it and makes something that steals market share from Web 2, or it's a city, state or something in between. That is kind of like when weed started becoming legal for sale and not just decriminalized in Colorado. And then quickly everyone's like, my God, Colorado is making bans off of weed. Why are we doing this? Let's make money off of weed too, So it could happen at a government level too. Sorry, go ahead, Vanessa.
Oh, I guess I was just going to jump onto Evan's point about enterprise adoption. And I think we haven't talked a lot about the two aspects of Web3 around composability and transparency that it brings. And there's a lot of benefit for enterprise scenarios to have something that's composable, where anyone can build upon it without anyone else's permission. And you look at enterprise use cases, whether it's tracking stock from various different places and supply chains. It could even be systems that rely on coordination among a lot of different places. Fairly basic. You think, well, how do you get your loyalty points to different companies and do those partnerships?
Sure.
If all of that's based on the blockchain, that's really easy because everyone can just write to it and to use it. So you can do it almost seamlessly, permissionlessly, and it can start to foster that sense. I guess back in the day when the internet was there, anyone could put up a website. With Web3 and with the technologies around being composable and transparent, there's a lot more applications that anyone can just build on top of it. Very much akin to the internet.
Yeah. Vanessa, one of the things I want to get into before we close, I know we're coming up on just about a little over an hour. I'd love to hear more from people, or excuse me, for people, what you're working on, what you're building, where you're talking, where you're sharing, how they can learn from you, how they can support you. What's coming up for you? What are you doing? Tell us how we can find it.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Evan. So if you're wanting to deal with my Twitter rants, you can find me at TechnologyPoet on Twitter. Trying to have a little fun there as well. Often posting information. I also have a show on YouTube, Just Crypto, youtube.com/Just Crypto. We're just getting started, so would love you to pop in there and let us know what you'd like to hear about. That's where I'm spending most of my time right now, is just learning and sharing. I do also advise a couple Web3 projects. I think one that has been made public is a project called Valorize, which is helping people to set up their community and create tokens to be able to deliver that next level of impact for their community. So really turn it from a loose gathering of folks to a true DAO with governance capabilities and the ability to share in the value that's created. And then a couple other ones, which I'm sure I'll share as I'm able to. So that's a little bit about me.
I love it. I love it.
Have always been obsessed with the handle TechnologyPoet. I think it's so cool.
Yeah, how did you come to that?
So when I was in college, my second year of college, I had this thought that I should give up technology to become a writer. And so I went, to the step of like trying to understand which English classes I needed to take and how all of that would be possible. And then I went through the exercise of looking at how much writers were paid compared with technologists. And I'm like, oh, that's probably not a good long-term plan for my life. But I still maintain that a lot of what we do with technology and code is in some sense poetry. And the more poetic and the stronger we can string together those words to create real meaning, the more beautiful the technology is that we create. It can be utilitarian or it can be poetry, just like language can be utilitarian task lists versus great novels and great poems.
That was going to be one of my last sort of questions for you is this personal for you? And it sounds like that's one of the ways it is humanizing the tech. Am I right?
Absolutely. And I think that's one blessing that I've had, in product management and product leadership is part of my job was to connect humans to the technology in a way that was beneficial for both sides. And I see especially as we talk going forward, AI is going to run everything. And we've got these robotic dogs running around that are going to do all sorts of crazy things. That in some sense, even the metaverse, you have these really dystopian images of people glued to the metaverse and divorced from the physical and what's truly human. And I think one of our tasks here on the leading edge is to ensure that humans have a place in this new world that we're creating, because we're all human. And honestly, you can believe that technology may have a soul, but right now, I think we are the beings with souls, and we need to elevate those beings, you and me and the communities around us.
I have a question for you, Vanessa, that I wanted to hit before we leave, and I can't tell if it's appropriate here more or if it could be moved back earlier in the conversation, because I think you're the person to talk to about this, and you don't have to go super into detail, but there is a culture in NFTs specifically. You see it on TikTok constantly with like the NFT creator circles. That's like this really toxic grind mentality. And the burnout is real. We've all felt it.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I love our team is because we're all so capable that if I need a minute, I can dip, and I trust implicitly them to do what I would do. And the same goes for all of us. And it bothers me so much to see these new NFT project founders entering the space with this idea that I have to basically just kill myself over being there 24/7. And I struggle with this a lot because there's that stigma, right? Like if you're not reachable in Discord, it means you're on the verge of a rug pull or something. And so I was just wondering, I guess, if you have any tips and advice, because obviously you're very in touch with your spiritual side and being able to be grounded and centered and, take care of yourself first. So just something about that always bothered me. And you just see them and they think that's the only way that they can make it is to just, torture themselves over their availability and sacrifice their entire rest of their life just to be in Discord 100% of the time. And I'm guilty of that myself.
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic point. And I think a lot of us in crypto, even on the other side of it, right, we're grinding in Discord to try and get the whitelist or whatever it is. But for creators in particular, one of the values of Web3 is it allows everyone to share in the value that's created. And oftentimes when you're the owner of a business or the owner of a project, and I've had this personal experience, you want to hold it very close to your chest. And you think you're the only one who knows what's right and how to communicate and how to interact. But often the true growth and release comes when you trust someone else to support you. And a lot of the strongest projects that I see have more than one person that's leading. I'll point to, two that I'm involved in, the Faceless Many and Nojin. There's multiple people who are in the community at different times. And so the burden isn't on one single person to carry everything. But also at the same time, being able to foster that community where the community itself holds each other up. And because they're all sharing in the value that's created, they're building something together that doesn't depend on you being there 100% of the time. We talked earlier in the conversation about leadership. And what does leadership mean in Web3? I think leadership is the ability to create a space where if you need to step out, things continue to work as if you were there. And that's when you've truly achieved your goal as a leader.
Is there anything that we didn't ask you about that you wanted to share?
Yeah. So you didn't ask me about my dogs.
yeah. Tell us about these more than human beings with souls. We could get into dogs.
Yeah. So just to be a little humorous, they are my babies. I have 2 golden retrievers. They're my heart and soul, and they're often what grounds me. My trick to staying sane on Twitter is I follow a bunch of dog accounts that have dogs in all sorts of crazy poses, and they're very much something that keeps me aware of what truly matters. Because at the end of the day, they're unconditionally loving. And they have very few needs, but one of them is very human in a sense. It's that love and connection and affection.
Especially Goldens. Goldens are just I think the number one social dog of all the breeds. I think that Goldens are the most emotionally responsive to humans. I've had a few Goldens and I love them. They're great.
Yeah. They're
great
amazing.
Listeners. Great happiness.
Alex, what's your thought on that? Would you agree?
I would not. No.
Well, you're an idiot. You're wrong. You're simply wrong.
Possibility. But no, I mean that's honestly why I am such a fan of pit bulls and why I have so many of them, because at the core of a pit bull's desire for everything and their reason for existence, it's to please their people. And I mean that's why they're of course very strong, but that's why they get abused so horribly, because they will do anything to make you happy and you have almost no chance of them turning on you. I mean that's why they're used in the fights and all that kind of stuff, because they're the nanny dog. It's the dog that they're great with people. They get horribly mistreated because of their desire to just make you happy. And the most horrendous rescue cases that I've been a part of have all been pit bulls, and they've come back from the brink of just like nightmares, just pure hell, and instantly they're like, oh, you're a person? No, we're cool. It's a new person. Even though I've been mistreated for my whole life, it's like there's 3 of them sleeping under my desk right now. But
beautiful. It actually just makes me think about perhaps humans who've had a similar journey, and maybe we don't give them the same respect and space to
100%.
let their true soul kind of unbreak itself and shine through.
Well said.
Yeah, I'm glad I
really
asked.
like that. And we're so glad, if we haven't made it apparent, that you're a part of our community. For those who don't know, Vanessa is what we call a whale. She has been.
How dare you?
I'm going to go work out now after that.
No, an NFT whale, and she's just been a big supporter of ours. And you've been in there since. Were you in there since Mint?
I did the second mint, because I think the first mint there was a couple challenges. Yeah, and I was still getting my footing in NFT land. And then the second mint, I'm like, I love the artwork, I love the ethos. I'm going to jump in. So I minted whatever the maximum was at that time. Got a zombie as well.
Oh, lucky you.
Nice.
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 Yeah. So, well, anyways, we thank you for being a part of it. We thank you for your criticisms and your feedback and your support all the way, because you always present it in such a way that it's hard to deny or ignore, and you do it respectfully, and we respect that you do that not only for us but for the Web3 space at large. So, thank you once again for coming on. It was great talking to you.
Same.
Yes,
Same.
Thank you for being here for me as well. The first time I ever spoke to you at length, obviously, I'm sure you remember, we spent a very long time on video chat, and I maintain that conversation made Faceless Many better because I just got very good feedback from you. It was, like Mack said, there's this idea in Web3 that, like, if you have any sort of feedback that is not just, praise, that it's FUD. And that couldn't be farther from the truth, because if you're not able to adapt and evolve and grow and improve your protocol, your project, whatever, you're going to fail. I promise you'll fail. So you've been a supporter, but to the point where if you see something and out of all of your experience, you can offer advice and wisdom, it's always been very helpful. So I appreciate you being here as well.
Yeah, likewise. It's been a tremendous blessing. I love you all. I consider you my friends and kind of Web3 compatriots. And so it's been a lot of fun. Really enjoyed our conversation today.
Rising up, blooper reel.
By the way, real quick, before we get into this, Alex, I just want to say, I like your vibe. I think that aesthetic is good, and you should
He's got
go
a nice
with
aesthetic.
that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Is the bottom button buttoned?
What?
The bottom one is, yes.
Okay, good.
What a phrase. Hey, I just want you to know that Alex and I are wearing like the same shirt, except mine just has less buttons.
Evan went
Alex has way less chest hair.
No, man. He's got the tattoos, though.
Yeah.
Do I need to back out and go find a deeper beat?
I think I might be in the wrong podcast. I was told I'd be some crypto.
Thanks so much for joining us on this episode of Rising Up. Hey, before you go, I've got a quick favor. Would you please take a second to leave us a rating and a comment or quick review? Aside from listening, it's the most important thing you can do to help our show, and we really appreciate it. If you want more from our team, be sure to follow us on Twitter at @TheFacelessMany. That's where you'll find the link to our Discord server and all the latest updates. If you'd like to be on our show, if you have questions for our team, or if you're interested in becoming a sponsor, send us an email to hello, that's HALLO @facelesscrypto.com, or get in touch through the contact form at our website. Thanks again for listening to the official podcast of the Financial Revolution. Until next time, rise up.